So this is the video for section 2.1, and in this section we're going to merge 2.1 and 2.2 together. So we're not going to cover the entirety of either section, but we're going to take pieces and do them kind of together as their own section. Okay, so if you go to your notes and you look at this part here, we're going to go ahead and go through this lecture over video. Okay, so let's go ahead and skip the cumulative review, just because of the simple fact that this is a little bit longer of a section, okay, and I don't want to take time to do that. But if you were going to, hopefully we'd know that these two are along a straight angle. So to set it up, you would just say 5x plus 4 plus 3x has to equal 180. Okay, then you go and you'd solve for x and then plug it in to get the angle measures. Okay, so to the new content. Okay, the first thing that we're going to cover are conditional statements. Now, conditional statement is a logic statement that has two parts. It has the hypothesis, which is the P, and this will make sense in a minute, and the conclusion, which is the Q. Okay, so conditional statements, sometimes we write it as like this, P then Q. Okay, and in words it'd say if P then Q. Okay, so usually your P and your Q will be given to you. So P is the hypothesis, Q is the conclusion. Okay, so for example, if I had P that you go to the store. Okay, and then my Q would be, I don't know, you buy candy. Okay, so if I wrote this as a conditional statement, if P, then Q, okay, so it's going to be if P, so if you go to the store, comma, then you buy candy. Okay, so that is how you would write a conditional statement. Okay, so conditional statements, we say, are written in if then form, because we have the if and the then. And it contains the hypothesis in the if part, and then in the then part is the conclusion. Alright, so let's look at example 1 now. Okay, here we have sentences, but I want to make them conditional sentences. Okay, so I want to put them in if-then form. Okay, so it says, all birds have feathers. Okay, now if I wanted to write this in an if-then form, I could say, if an animal is a bird, comma, then it has feathers. Period. Okay, so now this is a conditional statement. We've taken one short sentence and we've written it in a conditional statement, and we know because it's an if-then form. Okay, well, if I wanted to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion, now remember the hypothesis comes before the conclusion, just like in science, the hypothesis comes before the conclusion. So the hypothesis would be what's after the if. So this here is my hypothesis. Okay, and then it has feathers is my conclusion. Now notice both of these things by themselves is a complete sentence. It's a complete thought. Okay, so yeah, that's my hypothesis and my conclusion. All right, let's look at B now. It says if you are in Texas, oh sorry, it says you are in Texas if you are in Houston. Okay, so let's think about the order we should do this in. Okay, so if I wrote a conditional statement, we could write it if you are in Houston, comma, then you are in Texas. Okay, now we wouldn't write it if you were in Texas, then you are in Houston, because you could be in several different cities and that would not be an accurate statement. It would be a false statement. Okay, but now it is in conditional statement form. So this is my hypothesis. It's after the if. And this is my conclusion, which is after the then. Alright, so now that we've done a couple of examples, I want you to pause this video and try to do C and D on your own. Okay, and then when you come back, we will go over it. So pause this now, work on C and D, try to get it on your own, and then we'll go over it. Alright, so this is what you should have gotten. So C should say, if you are a member of the soccer team, then you have practice today. Okay, now the hypothesis of that is you are a member of the soccer team, and the conclusion is you have practice today. Then on part D, your conditional statement should be if an angle measures 30 degrees, then it is an acute angle. Okay, and your hypothesis is an angle measures 30 degrees, and your conclusion is an acute angle. Now, if you wrote these slightly different, like if you said if an angle is 30 degrees, then it is acute angle, that's fine too. It doesn't have to be exact word for word, but something close to this structure. Alright, so let's look at the next page now. Okay, we're going to talk about writing definitions a little bit. So when we write definitions, we can write them as a conditional statement. Okay, now when it says we can write it in a conditional statement, that just means that we can write it in if-then form, okay, or we can write it as its converse. Okay, now the converse is the reverse of the conditional statement. So remember, the conditional statement was if P then Q. The converse is just when we flip those two. So if Q then P. Okay, so for example, if I have a conditional statement that if an angle is a right angle, comma, then it measures 90 degrees. Okay, that's the definition of a right angle. Okay, so I can write the definition of a right angle in a conditional statement. So if an angle is a right angle, then it measures 90 degrees. Okay, now the converse of this, okay, is when I flip the parts. I flip the hypothesis and the conclusion. So it'd be if an angle is 90 degrees, comma, then it is a right angle. So definitions can be written either way. You can flip the hypothesis and the conclusion, and it's still going to be true. Okay? So it says both the conditional statement and the converse are true for definitions. Okay, and then here's an example here. All right, now let's look at example 2 here. Okay, decide whether each statement about the diagram is true and explain your answer. Okay, first of all, let's talk about this symbol right here. Okay, so this symbol is perpendicular. Okay, and hopefully you know from middle school, but you may not, or you may have just forgotten, which is okay. Perpendicular are simply two lines that intersect at a right angle. So any two lines that intersect and form a right angle, we would say those are perpendicular. Okay, so if we look at the diagram, we want to decide whether this is true or false and then explain it. Well, it says AC and BD are perpendicular. Okay, so this says AC is perpendicular to BD. So if I look here, AC is right here, BD is right here, and notice this right angle right there. Okay, so because there's a right angle, we do know that they are perpendicular, so I can say yes. And to explain, I can just say they intersect at a right angle, comma, so they are perpendicular. All right, let's look at the diagram. AEB, so AEB, so this angle here, and CEB, this angle here, are a linear pair. Okay, well, once again, if you know the definition of a linear pair, then you should know that, yes, those are a linear pair. Okay, because the angles are adjacent and the non-common sides are opposite rays. Okay, that's something that you should go back and look at if you don't know what either opposite rays are or a linear pair. That was in chapter 1. Okay, let's do one more together and then I'll let you guys try some by yourself. Okay, so EA and EB are opposite rays. So EA is right here, okay, and EB are opposite rays. So EA goes left and EB goes straight up. So those are not opposite rays. So I could say false. Okay, they do have same endpoint. But do not form a line. Remember, to be opposite rays, together they have to form that line. Alright, well, I'm going to pause this video, and I want you to do D, E, F, and G on your own, but this time use this other diagram. Okay, so go ahead, pause this video, try to work through those, and then when you're done, come back to it and we'll go over it. Alright, so this is what you should have gotten. Okay, so where it says is JMF and FMG supplementary. Well, if you look in this diagram here, these two angles are a linear pair. And remember, linear pairs are always supplementary because they always create a straight angle, which is 180 degrees. Okay. On E, it says M is the midpoint of FH. Well, it does look like it's the midpoint, but because there's no markings to show that FM and MH are equal or congruent, we cannot assume that they are, and therefore we cannot assume that M is the midpoint. Okay, on F it says angle JMF and angle HMG. So JMF is here, this one on the left. HMG is this angle on the right, are vertical angles. Okay, well, yes, if you know the vertical angles, you know that is a true statement. And we know that because when we draw these angles, we have two pairs of opposite rays that are created. And the last is FH, and remember this is a perpendicular sign. FH is perpendicular to JG. Well, remember, they're only perpendicular if they cross at a 90-degree angle, and there is no 90-degree angle marked there, so therefore we cannot assume that it is, and therefore we would have to say that that statement is false.